10 o'clock. All right, welcome. So this is the Reimagining Agile panel. This is the Reimagining Agile launch group, the four of us with our my esteemed colleagues over here. This is Heidi Musser. Heidi is the retired CIO of USAA and the former chairman of the Agile Alliance Board. Let's give Heidi a big hand. To this audience, at least, I don't believe Jim Highsmith needs any introduction at all. He's a legend in our communities with 6 books. He kind of invented Agile, if you will, or invented agility. So Jim Highsmith, let's give him a big hand. Jon Kern is esteemed partner and in crime, both co-authors of the Agile Manifesto. So thank you for being here, Jon, and also for bringing your colleagues from Adaptivist along as well. So thank you. Let's give Jon a big hand. So who here has heard anything about what we've been doing with the Reimagining Agile initiative? All right, that's Sarah, I believe. Yes. What have you heard, Sarah?
To be honest, I went with Heidi to lunch yesterday. So.
Okay. All right. So in a nutshell, there are several of us in the community that believe that it is time, especially in this age of AI disruption, that we should be looking at Agile methods and reimagining how we go about implementing Agile, not get sort of diverted and off track into heavy frameworks and rigid implementations, but really stay true to the spirit of Agile. So as such, what we want to do today is to have a discussion panel. I have some prep questions. We should be able to get through them and throw it open for Q&A to the audience. But I'm going to kick off with a question to our co-authors of the Agile Manifesto, Jim and Jon. So Jim, Agile values and principles emphasize human interaction, collaboration, and adaptability. How have the Agile core principles and technical practices in general held up in this evolving landscape? And are there any specific ones that require any sort of refresh and a return to prominence, things that have sort of dropped away and we've abandoned them at our own peril? So Jim, if you could kick us off.
Yeah, let me ask a question first. How many of you like to go to movies? How many of you stream movies like Netflix? How many of you have used to use CDs, DVRs? How many of you used to use the old tapes, the VCRs? The content was the same, right? The content was movies that you enjoyed. The packaging was different. You packaged as a VCR, you packaged as a DVD, you packaged as streaming. And I think Agile is somewhat the same. That Agile consists of practices. So you might have a practice like refactoring, that's a technical practice. You might have a sprint planning that was a project management practice. And you might have something like a retrospective that's a collaboration practice. So you have different practices. And then you have a mindset. You have an Agile mindset, an adaptive mindset. And then you have the methodology. And the methodology is like the packaging. You package practices, you package mindset into a particular methodology. So for example, XP, Extreme Programming, was a packaging for small teams, and it was very technically oriented. Scrum was another set of packaging. SAFe is another set of packaging. And I think in our industry, one of the things we do is we argue too much about the packaging and not the practices themselves, nor the mindset. And I think that's where we have to look to the future. So I think one of the things about this Reimagining Agile initiative is the follow-on was back to the basics, forward to the future. So what we wanted to do was to take the basics out of Agile, the fundamental practices and the fundamental mindset, and clarify those. And so people have been clarifying what we actually meant by some of those, and then extending them. So for example, like Sanjiv has done, is extended those practices and mindset into AI. And so I think the basics of the Agile values in terms of collaboration, in terms of individuals, in terms of change, in terms of focusing on the customer, don't change, but the packaging of what will change.
Thank you, Jim. Jon, how about you?
Well, I think the most important thing to think about for the manifesto is the very first value. I often would say things like regarding the Gang of Four patterns, if you can only remember one pattern, do separation concerns. And same thing with the manifesto. If you can only remember one value, it's individuals and interactions over process and tools. And I'm a freak about process and tools, but one of my good colleagues says, no, you're a freak about value. So for me, that's what's missed. Because it's the hardest part is the individuals and interactions. But it's the biggest lever you can move. But it's easier to sell process and sell tools and pretend like you're collaborating when you're actually just cooperating. And also the biggest challenge we have is the complexity. I think there's been really great talks. I love, Dan, you're talking a lot about VUCA, and Jessica and others talking about reimagining and VUCA and complexity. All of those, to your point, we're a lot more seemingly crazy these days and at a faster and faster pace. So it's more important than ever that we understand how to build human capacity to deal with that, because you can grow mentally, and that's something I've learned over the past 5 years, elements around vertical development and things about your mind and how we actually can grow and become better able to deal with complexity and have a chance to actually help solve it. So for me, this is a kind of like one more shot at trying to get people to understand what the hell we were talking about in 2001.
Great segue into my next sub-question over here. Are there any of the core values, principles, or practices that you believe should be reimagined in this VUCA, rapidly changing environment that we live in?
Well, I don't know about, like a lot of times people would say, was there anything you would change about the manifesto?
Or reinforced?
The reinforce, yes. Change, no, because I would say, tell me which one of the values doesn't apply today. I'm pretty sure they all still apply. But the reinforcing, yeah. I think the reimagining, I don't know if we're going to have more time to delve into the Reimagining Agile our website that we're barely starting. But the idea behind that is I think we can find exemplars. So Dan, I think you were talking about places where agility is flourishing. So I want us to be able to kind of mine the exemplars that are out there, find them, use them as shining beacons of hope, because there's a lot of Agile bashing, and every time I see it on LinkedIn, it's crap, because it's usually a bunch of stuff that, all right, yeah, you clearly don't know what Agile means, and none of that stuff you're complaining about has anything to do with agility. So I want to provide some counter arguments, some beacons of hope, and then from a researchy point of view, start mining those and try to figure out, all right, how did agility flourish where you are? So if you all have any, see us later, because I'm really looking for that. And it's a way to mine them for, I'm calling them moves or initiatives, but little small practices, ways that we can build a pattern library and then have other people try them out and experiment and see. It's like a meta layer above what Jim and I and others did in the gathering, where we were a bunch of software practitioners that were successful, and we figured out, because we're a bunch of object modelers, kind of what bubbled up from that were 4 values and 12 principles. Well, if we go a level above that and talk about how were we able to be successful? How were we able to do Agile things? I was in DoD land. How was I able to do lightweight processes? What was in place? What allowed this to happen? I think if we can go a level above, maybe we can create a set of practices and things people can try.
I think that's a great segue into our question for Heidi over here. So Heidi, as a former executive at USAA and the former board chair of the Agile Alliance, let me get my question here. What are the key strategic initiatives that our organizations, that we have private and public sector represented here, what should we focus on to ensure the sustainability and the scalability of Agile practices in the next decade with all of these disruptions that we talked about?
Thank you. That's a great question. Well, I said this in October at the Denver Mile High meetup, and I'll say it again today. Hell no, Agile is not dead. It is as alive and thriving and more relevant than ever. So with that statement and conviction, I want to begin by saying that people are the core of enterprise sustainability. People are the core of business agility. People are the core of digital transformation. People are the core of sustainable innovation. People are the core of Agile. So key strategic initiatives that organizations should focus on must be focused on people. All right, okay. Indeed, the very first lesson I learned about technology on my very first business trip ever back in 1986, when you could still smoke on airplanes, was that people are more important than technology, period. So that said, okay, I believe that building sustainable, okay, resilient, and adaptable businesses, organization models, leadership capabilities, those are the things that are going to play an integral role in determining the winners and losers in this next economic revolution. So what does that mean? Companies are going to need a strong digital core, okay? I think of this as reimagining IT. This is not just reimagining Agile. Reimagining IT, we need a strong digital core. Companies are also going to need to radically rethink how work gets done. We've heard a couple of our speakers talk to that already today. The focus must be investments in training people as much as on the technology itself, as much as the way we view movies. I love that analogy. And companies need to focus on sustainable innovation. I had a lovely conversation earlier today with Dan about that. And sustainable innovation matters because it's the key, for me, it's the key to building the capabilities that allow people-focused and product-driven organizations to operate at market speed. Market speed is the speed of technology innovation, and it's getting faster, okay? And we need to be able to do that as a matter of routine. It's not only the major competitive advantage, but this will ensure enterprise sustainability in the 21st century. And I also must say this, Peter Drucker, he observed years ago, he was right about so many things, an established company in an age demanding innovation that is not able to innovate is doomed to decline and extinction. He said this over 25 years ago, okay? So at its core, innovation, what does it demand? Taking risks, placing bets, curiosity, asking questions, learning fast, and most importantly, an agile mindset. That agile mindset, understanding, comprehension, imagination. Agile is a fundamentally different way of working, thinking, and being. Everything must change. Everything must change. And organizations are going to need to sustainably innovate if they're going to be able to thrive in this world of constant change.
Thank you, Heidi. Very well said. I really appreciate that. Back over to you, Jim. We were talking last night, and we talked about these change initiatives going back to lean and agile and all that. So I have a question for you, but I'd like you to throw in the statistic that you talked about yesterday. But my question is, you wrote an article recently about the causes of disappointments with agile methods. So despite 20 plus years of success, and we have so many organizations represented here from DHS to Nationwide that have successfully transformed their enterprises with agile methods, some dissatisfactions exist out there. What do you think are the core or the root causes of some of these dissatisfaction? And if you could throw in the statistic about it.
Yeah, well, I think one of the root causes, by the way, as the oldest member of the panel here, I have some, once in a while, that my train of thought leaves the station without me. And so I have this cheat sheet below me that I'm going to refer to every now and then. Let me just give a couple of numbers. The CEO of NVIDIA is one of the 4 or 5 companies who has a more than $1 trillion valuation. Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA. He gave a presentation. The new NVIDIA chip has 208 billion transistors on it. When I was designing circuits as an electrical engineer in the early 60s, we had transistors that were the size of the end of an eraser on a pencil. If you took 208 billion chips the size of, or transistors the size that we used to have, there 8 chips would cover the entire area of Washington, D.C. Those are some of the numbers we're up against. GPT-2 had 18 billion parameters. GPT-4 has 100 trillion parameters, and there's a Chinese model that has 174 trillion parameters. So things are just going at a phenomenal rate. The cost to train GPT-4, just the cost to train GPT-4 was $100 million in computer time. So the numbers are staggering, and so I think that one of the things we have to do is we have to clarify those things in the Agile Manifesto that need some clarification. For example, one of the things that people talk about all the time is they don't understand the word over. Over does not mean instead of, but many people have interpreted its individuals and interactions instead of process and tools. Well, that doesn't sound very good. You know, it's what's more important. And so I think the clarification is important. I think the extensions are important. So Peter Merkel of Xscale has a nice little chart out now where he has extended the Agile values and principles into something that's Agile/AI values and principles. Now, I don't know, I haven't read it in detail, so I don't know if I agree with it or not, but at least it's an attempt to extend some of the values into the current environment, and I think those things are important. And what was your last question? That train left the station.
The dissatisfactions. Yeah, we'll bring the train back. We'll catch it at the next stop. What are some of the root causes of the dissatisfactions that you believe?
I think part of the root cause, I've got several, but I think capability is one of them. And what I think happens, I'll go back to Jerry Weinberg's law of raspberry jam. The farther you spread it, the thinner it gets. And so I think out on the edges, our knowledge and experience with Agile has gotten very thin. And unfortunately, we have people that have had a year or two of certifications, or as I call them, Scout merit badges, and little experience, and they're teaching new people. And that's inevitable with something that's that big. One of the things, Pete Behrens and I did an article here last couple of weeks on major transformations. We looked at the transformation of lean manufacturing at Toyota, agile development, and big data. And if you look at those transitions, you learn a couple of different things. One of which is it's the culture rather than the strategy. Again, that was from Peter Drucker years ago, said culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I don't know about lunch. So it's all about the culture in an organization and the mindset. So mindset, to me, mindset is individual, culture is organizational.
Okay, thank you. John, quick question for you. How do you think that in organizations that we should incorporate and adjust our processes and tools and all that to incorporate some of these new techniques, new practices, new learnings?
Well, I think one of the things I'd like to make a comment about the Boy Scouts and versus training. Like, I don't do training unless it's very narrow. At least the Boy Scout merit badge, you're actually doing the thing, you know, versus talking about doing the thing. So for me, it's quite simple. It's getting back to that first value. I don't think I've ever done Scrum. I don't think I've ever done anything. I have a lot of really standard practices, a lot of ways that I think are foundational methods to my practice. But the key is the context of which you're actually having to face in your organization, your team, your business. So the thing that I tend to preach and my colleagues and I tend to do is really help people figure out what's the best way for them to achieve success. And I like to say that it didn't take the Agile Manifesto, like, oh, thank goodness we've got the manifesto and Scrum. Now we can actually build software. Like, no, like, folks were doing it long before we came, Matter of fact, we were a bunch of us that knew how to do software. We just kind of wrote things down. So I never lose that humility to realize people given the right set of circumstances and environment, which is the key that I think we're looking for, is what is that? What is that? What do I mean by that? I've seen it a couple times, I've been in it a couple times, but it certainly is not omnipresent in most of the places we work. So what is it that we can do to help build that environment so that people can do what they do best and be successful by actually working in what it is they need to do? And they will create their own process. They might even create their own tools, but they'll certainly create happy customers.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Heidi over here, but I do want to bring in sort of a very apropos quote that Dan mentioned in his talk. Somebody asked a question about change management, and you had a bunch of quotable quotes. I have to scribble them down. This one said about change management. You said it's not just about change management or not about change management. You said it's about developing an organization whose capacity is deep imaginative change. Heidi, as an executive that has rolled out Agile methods across a global corporation, Agile practices often hinge on change management or developing the capacity for deep imaginative change. What would you advise all these wonderful leaders over here who are tasked with that responsibility?
Well, first I would advise taking a very deep breath because this is really, really hard. Part of why I think this is really hard is I think the framework that we wrap around this. Transformation is not a project. Transformation is not a program. Transformation is not an event, nor is innovation a project, a program, or an event. Transformation is a core business capability, and we need to treat it and respect it as such.
Thank you so much. I can now rip up my pre-prepared set of questions and throw it up open to the room. We have, I think, about 5 or 10 minutes. Bill,
Yep.
kick it off. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Well, I have the mic, so raise your hand and I'll bring it over.
Questions? Sasan.
Thank you, Sasan Afsusi. Great presentation. Everything is subject to change, including the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles. Here's the questions. Agile is not the methodology for technology. We know that. It's about to change the concept. It's about to change the mindset. But however, the technology has the largest actually contributors to Agile transformation, including everyone in this room and other places in the country. So the question is here that, with respect to AI and recent changes to technology roadmap, which has huge impact to everything, does the Agile Manifesto or 12 principle also consider to the changes? You know, can we see any changes to those principles and also manifesto somehow, sometimes?
The manifesto is not going to be rewritten, I can tell you that. Not by the 17, because we can't agree on anything anymore. Not by the 4 of us either. But I think extensions are what's going to be different. And you have to remember, when the manifesto was written, the environment was, there was a very, very small number of people involved in sort of iterative development. And the waterfall community was huge. And now, you know, 75 or 80% of the companies in the world profess to be doing Agile. Whether they're doing it or not is another story. But at least they profess it. And so there are people that, for example, have taken marketing, and they have now as an Agile marketing organization. And they've taken the Agile principles and extended them into marketing. There's, like I said, Peter Merkel extended the principles into AI and Agile. So I think there are going to be extensions that maintain the Agile values and principles, but extend them into a new era. But I don't, you know, the manifesto itself is a historical document, and it's not going to get rewritten. I mean, for example, who would listen to those 17 people today? You know, there are a lot of other voices that you'd say he or she or they should get involved in this, and pretty soon you've got a committee of thousands of people, and getting them to agree on a new set of manifesto values would be pretty tough. So I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think it should happen. Amy Webb, who is a futurist, spoke at the South by Southwest conference a little while ago, and she said the 3 things that are going to create a technology supercycle, or AI, biotech, and connected ecosystems of things. And she actually says there's a, we know about Gen X and Gen Y. She says there's a Gen T, and we're in Gen T generation right now, transitioning generation, and that we're all involved in a major transition, and we either get with it or we fall behind.
John, anything to add?
Yeah, certainly we're not going to change the words or anything like that, but maybe a little bit like the Constitution, you can add amendments, who knows?
Exactly.
But the point behind the Reimagining Agile website is to open it up and turn, eventually there'll be users and content and things that people can argue about, talk about, discuss, and hopefully from that more worldwide approach, we might find things that you're looking for. But it's not going to be, a handful of people that randomly bumped into each other on some mountain. It's going to be random people that bump into each other in the global space. So, TBD.
TBD. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please go to reimaginingagile.com and sign up to join this movement, even as we get ready for the next question. It's from Isabella.
Here's another one.
Hi, Isabella Ray. My question is, in the previous years, we've seen a lot of companies, some here in the area, that have decided to get rid of their agile practices. What is your response to executives in other companies looking at these events? And how do we, as Agilists, transform that message?
I think that's a great question. I would like every single member of the panel to answer. Who wants to go first?
One of the things about some of those stories, that they were getting rid of some people, but they're also readjusting as opposed to replacing. And in particular, changing the ratio of coaches and scrum masters to technical people, rather than getting, so they eliminated some people, but they were also transitioning the numbers of people in each. So I think that's a natural phenomenon. If you look at the transitions, the transformations, lean, agile, and big data, and you look at what the positives were and what the negatives were, Agile probably was successful, depends on which study you look at, 60 or 70% of the time. That's 2 or 3 times better than any of those other transitions. And so, yes, there's plenty of room in the 30 or 40% that didn't make it to improve. But I think overall, if you look at the span of 23 years, Agile's been pretty successful.
And I would say, from a pragmatic point of view, no one's asking for Agile, right? We're looking for value, or we're looking for other things. Being Agile and being able to produce is what the real goal is. So I don't know exactly what you're referring to when people are getting rid of Agile practices, but to me, it's more important to hopefully still follow the types of things that are in the principles and values. Whether you call it Agile or not doesn't matter. To me, that's actually the mistake that I think a lot of people confused. Early on, I remember being like keynoting a Java 1 or something like that, and other people having memorized recently the Agile Manifesto. I'm pretty sure I don't think I could have done the values off the top of my head, because I just live them and do them. But other people is really critical. And so it's the difference between a title or the label versus the doing and the being. And so one of the gentlemen speakers, Tim, I think he was talking about his daughter's being a scrum master. And I'm thinking, well, you better be more than that. You better learn. Like for me, I like being a generalizing specialist, not an expert in much of anything, because the real thing to care about is value and making customers happy. And that's done in my world with Agile principles and things like that, but you don't have to use that term. So that's what I think could be the mistake that happened in our industry, we suddenly think some certificate for 2 days in a class is meaningful. It's something, but it's not everything. It's really what you do and how you do it is more important.
It's a merit badge, and so we're going to have Heidi close out our panel with an answer to Isabella's question.
Okay, we'll take another deep breath.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, that's such a great question. Most leaders do not have the knowledge, the skills, the competencies to lead modern businesses. I have an executive MBA. I have a degree in accounting. When I studied modern management in the 1970s, it was based on the practices of the Industrial Revolution. It was based on what Henry Ford taught us and what Deming taught us and what Frederick Taylor taught us. Not relevant. There's very little I learned in B school that prepared me to lead in this world, and that's true of most leaders in most organizations. They don't have the skills, the knowledge, the competencies to manage a modern business. And we have to acknowledge that, we have to own that. More importantly, many don't have the courage to ask for help, which is the core leadership discipline. Modern business demands modern ways of working. This is more than just about reimagining Agile. This is about reimagining education, reimagining management, reimagining leadership, reimagining information technology. This is a different world. Our speakers have called that out already. This is a fundamentally different way of working, of thinking, of being. And we need to respect it for that and own it for that and recognize that everything must change, including you.
Thank you very much.